What's up, gangsters? How about a little bit of myth busting? If you guys have watched much of my nonsense, you know it's one of my favorite things to do because, like anything in model making, we've got some myths that have just persisted over the years. Things like insisting that you have to have a gloss surface to decal successfully. Don't ever spray lacquer on top of acrylic. You should only pull the needle out of your airbrush from the front. Kabuki tape is actually a thing. You know, these are all things that you'll hear people announce with great authority pretty much anytime any group of model makers is gathered together on the internet. And another one that's really common, and this is one that's persisted partly because even some of the airbrush manufacturers have said this, and that is that you should never use Windex to clean said airbrush. So, this one came up a couple of days ago on one of the old Facebook model making forums, and I just thought, well, you know what, let's talk about that one because it really is complete and total horseshit, and I'm going to explain why. So, first of all, what's the problem with Windex? Why do people claim that you should never use it? Well, because Windex contains ammonia, and ammonia allegedly will destroy your airbrush. Let's talk about that. What is the real truth about ammonia in Windex? So, if you actually go to the SC Johnson website and look up what's inside Windex, they'll tell you pretty clearly that it contains ammonium hydroxide, also known as ammonia water. And if you dig around a little bit further on the internet, you'll find that it contains 5% ammonia. And basically, ammonium hydroxide is just a diluted form of ammonia. So that's the first thing you need to understand, is it's not pure ammonia to begin with. The second thing is 5%, okay? 5%. That's important. It's an important thing to remember. So what's the real truth about ammonia in an airbrush? To understand that, you have to understand what your airbrush is made out of. All right, so the first thing you need to know is that your airbrush is made mostly out of brass in most cases. It's machined brass. It's a cheap and relatively durable material. It's great for making components like this. Well, so why is it shiny and silver? Because it's got chrome plating on it. More specifically, this is what's typically known as triple nickel chrome or bright chrome. And what that basically means is that it's got a layer of chromium and then it's covered by another layer of nickel. And there's a bunch of technical reasons why they do that that I'm not going to get into. Oh yeah, by the way, part of the reason why I know that what I'm about to tell you is the truth is because, as I occasionally mention, I hope it's occasionally, somebody accused me the other day of constantly reminding people of it. I don't think that's true. I hope it's not true because I hate the appeal to authority, but I do have an engineering background. Spent quite a few years getting a master's degree in mechanical engineering and then doing a lot of mechanical engineering design work. So, yeah, this is just one of those things that I know. Like I said, I hate the appeal to authority, but it is what it is. If you know, you know. So anyway, what is the real truth about how ammonia affects brass, because that's what your airbrush is made out of, and chrome plating? So how you find that out is you can do a bunch of digging around, or you can just look at the charts that I have found for you. So let's do that. All right, so this chart right here, first of all, will tell you the physical and chemical properties of chromium. All right, and if you notice, right here where I've highlighted, it says that electroplated chromium has excellent resistance to a variety of corrosive environments. You skip down a little further and you can see where it says that R indicates usually completely resistant. And then skip down a little further and you'll see in the chart where it says that aqua ammonia, that's just another name for ammonium hydroxide, gets a rating of R. So there you go. And no matter how many charts you look at, you're going to always find pretty much the same thing. Chrome plating is highly resistant to ammonia. Now, what about brass? Okay, that's where the potential problem is. So let's look at this other chart. Now you can see where I've highlighted right here that brass gets a C, and that's not a very good grade. That's basically not recommended. And that's how pretty much all materials are rated in these charts. They get an A or a B or a C depending on how well they do when exposed to any particular substance. Okay, so that sounds kind of horrible on the surface, right? Brass and ammonia are definitely not recommended to go together. Okay, so let's go back to what I said a minute ago about the percentage. Remember that Windex is only about 5% ammonium, so that's just not very much. Now, let's also talk about how these ratings are arrived at. What they do is they have standardized tests. They have exposed the material in question to the corrosive substance that they want to find out about at a certain temperature for a specific amount of time, and they measure basically how much corrosion happens. And the kind of time frames that we're talking about are the sorts of time frames that you would associate with like water flowing through a piping system. So pretty much constantly and at high volume, right? So unless you're just doing a shit ton more model making than I am, way more than your airbrush is ever going to be exposed to. Basically, what you can conclude from all of this is that for the tiny amount of time that the tiny amount of ammonia that's in your Windex is actually touching the surface of the inside of your airbrush, you're probably not going to have an issue. If you do have an issue, it's not going to be because Windex, as some people insist, ate the chrome plating in your airbrush. That's just not going to happen. What can happen is the chrome plating can become degraded because, like with mine, there's some scratches down here inside the cup from where I've cleaned it out with a little paintbrush. Some guys like to take a paper towel and wipe out the inside of the cup. That creates some abrasion. The plating is usually not as good on the inside of a part as it is on the outside of a part, so it just may be thin. And if your plating is disappearing, chances are it's because of abrasion or something like that. It's not because Windex is chewing it up. That much you can be certain of. Now, if all your plating was gone and you had nothing but brass in there and you were in the habit of leaving Windex soaking in your airbrush all the time, well, yeah, then you might have an issue. Now, one of the things that I think is kind of amusing and ironic about all this is that I feel pretty sure if you could do some kind of statistical correlation, you'd find that at least some percentage of the guys who insist that you cannot get ammonia anywhere near your airbrush would also be future users. Now, why is that relevant? Well, take a look at this page right here, which is also from the SC Johnson website. And you can see very clearly right here that future contains, yep, you guessed it, it also has 5% ammonium hydroxide in it. So, if you're telling people that they're dumb for putting Windex in their airbrush, and then you're immediately spraying future through your own airbrush, yeah, you might not want to let anybody know because that would just be embarrassing, right? So anyway, there you go. I hope I've given you substantial, sufficient evidence to know that, if you're one of those guys who really likes to shoot acrylics and you really want to use Windex as your airbrush cleaner, that you really don't need to worry about all the horror stories that some people tell you, for why you should never do that. And look, I personally don't shoot a lot of acrylics, but I understand why people like ammonia as an airbrush cleaner. Or things that contain ammonia, I should say. If you want to get serious, pure ammonia would be the deal if you could stand the smell. because it's a solvent for latex. And what I call normal acrylics like Vallejo, AK, Ammo, some of those, they contain, some of those ingredients. And yeah, a little bit of ammonia in your airbrush cleaner is probably going to help you out a little bit. But having said that, yeah, I think a lot of guys do just as good with isopropyl alcohol. Some of them, you can clean out with lacquer thinner. Some acrylics will turn to sludge if you try that. So, you have to experiment a little bit. But point being, I don't even know that Windex is the best cleaner in the first place. But if you're going to use it, you can at least use it with confidence. So, all right, a little bit of myth busting there. I hope you found that at least informative, and maybe you're a little bit more sufficiently armed for one of those Facebook debates. So, yeah, anyway, as always, I appreciate you watching, and much love.